The amazing thing when you get into it is you discover so many unlikely, but necessary things came together at just the right time, as if it were predestined.
So it has been with AA. By faith and by work, we have been able to build upon the lessons of an incredible experience.
Our message to the world is not that we have succeeded in ceasing to drink, but that in so ceasing to drink, we have succeeded in learning to live.
It started with just 2. Today, that number is over 2 million worldwide. And membership of Alcoholics Anonymous continues to grow, transforming countless lives every day. AA is not an invention. It evolved slowly by trial and error. AA's remarkable journey is documented here in the General Services Office archives in New York. The archives are comprised of rare photos, films, newspaper clippings, and other items that AA is working to preserve, so the rich experience of the past will continue to guide us.
We take it all so much for granted now, but it's just a miracle that AA survived. The whole history of the program, it seems to me, is the history of the right people mysteriously being at the right place for each other at the right time.
It's the early 1930s. Ruined by the Wall Street crash, a young stockbroker struggles with business and booze. His wife works at a retail store for steady income. Bill W.'s drinking gets worse. He is hospitalized not once, but 4 times in 2 years. His doctor tells him alcoholism is a disease for which there is no cure. During his final stay in the hospital, Bill undergoes an extraordinary spiritual experience. After being discharged, helping other alcoholics becomes the focus of his existence. To find drunks, he walks the streets of Brooklyn and Manhattan with little success. It's not what Bill is looking for. 5 months later, in the spring of 1935, he travels to Akron, Ohio, hoping to buy a business. The deal falls through. Depressed and alone in his hotel lobby, Bill sees the bar and feels a familiar temptation. He also spots a plaque listing local churches and preachers. Pacing back and forth, he is about to make a choice that will ultimately transform his life and the lives of millions of alcoholics.
Soon I found myself saying, well, perhaps I could go in there and have a drink of ginger ale and possibly scrape an acquaintance to pass away this lonely afternoon. And then I caught myself and thought, well, I have been restored to sanity. I can see I'm in danger. I walked over to the church directory again, thinking, well, now perhaps I had better find an alcoholic that I might talk to, because at last I see that I need such a person as much as he could possibly need me.
After many dead-end phone calls, Bill tries an odd name, Reverend Walter Tunks. Tunks understands Bill's plea. He puts him in touch with a local socialite, Henrietta Seiberling. Although a non-alcoholic, she sympathizes with Bill and arranges a meeting with Dr. Bob, a local surgeon who is also an alcoholic. He agrees to give Bill 15 minutes. Bill and Dr. Bob hit it off. Both men hail from the same state of Vermont. They swap stories of their drinking and the damage it has done to their lives. Dr. Bob believes Bill is the first person he's ever met with a genuine understanding of alcoholics because of his knowledge and because Bill himself is also an alcoholic. Bill tells Dr. Bob the story of his old drinking buddy, Ebby, who had controlled his alcoholism through a spiritual awakening.
He had been released, as he said, from this awful compulsion to drink.
Well, he said, I'll put it to you in a few words. I've got religion. His story made an impression on me. It was bound to. Because, after all, we were blood brothers under the skin, victims of the same malady. So what he had to say struck me deep.
Ebby's story had led Bill's spiritual transformation in the hospital. Afterward, Bill felt at peace with little desire to continue drinking, even though he was in fact a confirmed alcoholic. Bill's caring doctor, William Silkworth, told him to hang on to his spiritual revelation. This experience became a turning point in Bill's struggle with the disease. Bill and Dr. Bob talked for 5 hours. Little did they realize their chance meeting in 1935 would set in motion a profound chain of events. Dr. Bob invites Bill W. to stay in Akron. Together, resolved to help other alcoholics, they stick with a simple approach, one drunk talking to another. Miraculously, it had worked for Dr. Bob after he and Bill chatted for so many hours. After a few initial failures, they found Bill D., a lawyer who becomes AA number 3. One by one, Bill and Dr. Bob began reaching alcoholics in a way other groups could not, simply because both men had personally experienced what alcoholism did to their own lives. And so the journey begins. Within a few months, Bill W. and Dr. Bob established an enduring alliance, one that will mark them as the co-founders of a remarkable international fellowship. In Akron, at the local St. Thomas Hospital, with the help of Sister Mary Ignatia, Dr. Bob begins a program to treat alcoholics. It's a first, for this small Catholic hospital has never admitted drunks before.
I recall very distinctly coming to the chapel for prayer shortly after 5 one morning, only to be met by the night supervisor who told me in no unmistakable terms that the next time I admitted a DT to the hospital, I had better stay up all night and run around the corridors after him.
Bill W., meanwhile, returns home to his wife Lois and sets up a group in New York, first at their Brooklyn home and later on at a 24th Street location in Manhattan. It was known as the first AA clubhouse. Soon there are 40 sober alcoholics in the fellowship. It's fall 1937. Buoyed by the success of these early efforts, Bill starts work on a book with the help of Hank P., an early member. Bill hopes the book will be useful in reaching out to new members. Ruth Hawk, Bill's first secretary and a non-alcoholic, types diligently. Drafts of the manuscript travel between New York and Akron, where Dr. Bob has established a membership even larger than Bill's. It takes nearly 2 years for Alcoholics Anonymous to be published. It will soon be known as the Big Book. It's not certain where the name Alcoholics Anonymous actually comes from. Legend has it that the early fellowship sometimes humorously referred to themselves as an anonymous bunch of drunks. The name also stuck because AA insisted on their members' anonymity, placing the principles of the AA fellowship before personalities. The Big Book details the 12 steps to recovery as Bill wrote them. This book will go on to be published in over 40 languages around the world. Included in each edition are personal stories written by recovering members of AA. Bill W.'s notion to include recovering alcoholic stories, including his own, is designed to reach out to still suffering alcoholics, much as Bill himself had reached out to Dr. Bob. Simply one drunk talking to another. The Big Book and its stories of people carrying the message of hope is probably responsible for starting more meetings and helping more suffering alcoholics than any other tool in AA's program. In the Big Book, Bill W. identifies the initial phases necessary for recovery, beginning with the first 3 steps. First, experiencing calamity or disaster. Second, admitting defeat. and third, appealing to a higher power for help. The theme of recovery through spirituality, or a higher power, had presented itself time and again to Bill as he searched for answers in the early years. From the Reverend Sam Shoemaker, who led the Oxford group in New York, an organization predating AA run by non-alcoholics, which emphasized religion. From Father Ed Dowling, an unwavering supporter during AA's early years. A crippled Jesuit priest from St. Louis, Dowling believed spiritual recovery often worked in a reverse fashion. At AA's 20th anniversary, Father Dowling expressed his belief.
I doubt if there's anybody in this hall who really ever sought sobriety. I think we were trying to get away from drunkenness. I don't think we should despise the negative. And I know I have a feeling that if I ever should find myself in heaven, I think it will be from backing away from hell.
Bill, of course, initially received the spiritual message from his close friend Ebby. Ebby had also told Bill about Roland H., a desperate alcoholic who had sought treatment from the renowned psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Unsuccessful in his analytic approach, Jung finally suggested Roland seek honest contact with friends to spark a spiritual transformation which might help him. With this suggestion, Roland H. joined the Oxford group and was able to share his experiences in a group setting. His drinking was halted through this process. Bill was also greatly influenced by Dr. Silkworth, his doctor at New York's Towns Hospital. Bill called Silkworth the little doctor who loved drunks. It is believed the physician helped some 40,000 alcoholics during his career. Silkworth had convinced Bill that alcoholism is an illness with serious medical consequences. The doctor also encouraged Bill to embrace his spiritual insights. At the hospital, Ebby had given Bill a book, Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. The book had presented Bill with notions which helped him to visualize the AA program.
Nearly all of these experiences in this book had to do with people who had found themselves in an utterly hopeless state. Following the reading of this book, there came to me a vision of a chain reaction among alcoholics, in which each recovered man would come to the next, hope in one hand and hopelessness in the other, saying in effect, if you are an alcoholic, your only resource is a spiritual experience.
Despite Bill's clarity of vision, the early growth of Alcoholics Anonymous is a constant struggle. In the late 1930s, the notion of a sober alcoholic seems bizarre to most people. And why anonymous? What was AA hiding? The archives reveal many of the difficulties of getting AA started and keeping it going. Early in 1939, right after the big book is published, AA is in desperate need of income. Hoping to stimulate book sales, New York member Morgan R. is interviewed on the famous Gabriel Heater Talk of the Town radio show. Just 12 listeners respond. That same spring, Reader's Digest turns down an article about AA. The fledgling organization is barely one step ahead of its creditors. Then in September, Liberty magazine, a popular weekly, publishes the article Alcoholics and God, outlining a spiritual philosophy. Slowly, the big book begins to sell. Over the next 2 months, the Cleveland Plain Dealer prints a series of articles about Alcoholics Anonymous. Meetings in Cleveland soon multiply. The articles observe that the sponsorship format seems to work effectively. The practice suggests that each new AA member chooses an existing member as a sponsor in a chain of referrals. Bill's friend Ebby has been credited as being AA's first sponsor, and Bill, in passing the message on through Dr. Bob, became Dr. Bob's sponsor, a successful tradition which remains ongoing. In 1940, John D. Rockefeller arranges a dinner for AA. Bill had dreamed of a well-financed global network for his organization and believes this could be his lucky break. But at the dinner, Nelson Rockefeller, sitting in for his father, does not offer financial assistance. Rather, he suggests handing out complimentary copies of the big book for anyone who might be interested. To Bill, Rockefeller's remarks seem disastrous. But dinner guest Alberta Scott, chairman of Riverside Church, sees the wisdom in Mr. Rockefeller's position and convinces Bill that AA's spiritual program might well be destroyed by financial contributions from the wealthy attendees. A big benefit from the Rockefeller dinner is publicity, which provides AA with a new level of recognition. It soon becomes evident to Bill that spiritual recovery must be AA's primary goal. From this realization, the principle of self-support is born. Soon after, in the spring of 1941, a landmark article by Jack Alexander appears in the Saturday Evening Post, a magazine with a weekly circulation of over 3 million. It's just the national exposure that AA needs. Inquiries jump to 1,100 per month, and by year's end, membership spirals above 5,000 in 160 localities, including a growing number of women. What's more, AA's approach actually seems to be working. 2 out of 3 members are considered fully recovered. AA grows dramatically during the 1940s. Membership increases by 6,000 annually. Many more articles detailing AA's success are published in the American popular press. In the Midwest, Dr. Bob continues to guide the rapid growth of the Akron and Cleveland chapters, staying in constant touch with Bill on a variety of issues. In 1944, the Grapevine begins monthly publication. Originally intended as a newsletter for AAs in the New York metropolitan area, copies are sent to 300 group secretaries around the country. With World War II still raging, the editors also send a copy to every known AA member in the armed forces, believing the monthly newspaper will be especially helpful to soldiers so far away. Soon the Grapevine catches on with groups around the country. In 1945, when asked whether the Grapevine should become the national magazine of AA, the membership's answer was a resounding yes. A visit to the archives shows that non-alcoholics were playing a direct role in AA's history as well. Dr. Henry Thibault was one, the first psychiatrist to incorporate AA's principles in his practice. He viewed the 1940s as a most pivotal period.
AA was then in its miracle phase. Hopeless drunks were being lifted out of the gutter. Individuals who had sought every known means of help without success were responding to this new approach. To be close to any such group, even by proxy, was electrifying.
Paralleling AA's growth, a new public awareness about alcoholism begins to emerge during this era. In 1945, Hollywood examines the malady for the first time in The Lost Weekend, starring Ray Milland. Just after the war, the March of Time produces documentaries specifically about AA. And in 1949, a syndicated comic strip, Wash Tubs, portrays a fictional character who gets help through Alcoholics Anonymous. Around this time, Bill begins crafting an official blueprint for the fellowship to follow, using experience accumulated over the first decade of AA. Insightfully, he calls it 12 Points to Assure Our Future. The guidelines will soon be known as the 12 Traditions. From these principles, the 3 legacies of AA emerge: recovery, unity, and service. Recovery, as represented in the 12 steps, focuses on the individual member, paralleling AA's own early battle to get it right. The 12 steps are, in fact, a collective wisdom, developed through considerable trial and error. They offer to suffering alcoholics a path away from the enslavement of the disease of alcoholism. As Bill describes it, Our traditions are a guide to a better way of living. Our traditions are to group survival and harmony what AA's 12 steps are to each member's sobriety and peace of mind. The second legacy, unity, reflected in the 12 traditions, focuses on the AA group. It starts with the caution that individual recovery depends on the welfare of the group. It is also a reminder that individually we have failed to overcome our enemy, but together we can succeed. The second legacy goes on to emphasize the importance of AA's singleness of purpose and how each one of us must carry the AA message from one person to the next for the good of the group. This forms the core of the AA pledge.
I am responsible when anyone, everywhere, reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible.
The third legacy is service. This is initially outlined in Bill's manuscript on the 12 concepts for world service. The concepts describe a future service structure of AA, including the conference and the General Service Board. In an effort to provide every member with the opportunity for service in the larger fellowship, Bill and Dr. Bob, with the help of Earl Trent, founder of AA in Chicago, set two major goals in 1948. The fellowship now claims 60,000 members in 28 countries, and they are more compelled than ever to plan ahead. The first goal is to consolidate the 12 traditions. The second is to organize an annual conference to meet with the trustees and staff. Already, Bill and Dr. Bob are thinking about AA's continued survival when the time comes that they will no longer be able to participate in AA affairs. In effect, Bill and Dr. Bob are preparing AA to be self-functioning. The conference was to be an experiment lasting 5 years, to find out if such a gathering could function as a collective voice for AA, but have no governing power. But just before Thanksgiving 1950, as Bill makes preparations for the first conference, sad news arrives. Dr. Bob is dying of cancer. Bill drives to Akron. There, the doctor lightly reminds Bill not to louse it up and to keep it simple. It's the last time the two men will see one another. 5 months later, the first General Service Conference is held. To many, it represents AA's coming of age, a chance for the fellowship to demonstrate its ability to truly stand on its own. It also gives alcoholics a chance to carry AA's message of hope all over the world. Later, the AA Conference will vote unanimously to accept the 12 concepts for world service. Bill declares the 12 concepts are an interpretation of AA's world service structure. They reveal the evolution by which it has arrived in its present form and detail the experience and reasoning on which our operation stands today. AA had first formed the Alcoholic Foundation in 1938 to oversee the office and manage AA's financial affairs. The foundation consisted of 2 alcoholic and 3 non-alcoholic members. Over the years, this balance will be shifted from non-alcoholics to alcoholics. In 1966, the makeup of the Board of Trustees was changed to include 7 non-alcoholics and 14 alcoholics, as it has remained to present day. The conference decides many issues over the years. In 1953, resolving that as a spiritual organization, it should not be incorporated. In 1954, establishing democratic representation for every member with the general service structure. In 1958, deleting honest before the word desire in the preamble. In the decades to follow, AA meetings grow larger and larger. AA's message of hope continues to spread around the globe. Carrying the message, the cornerstone of AA's success, rests on the simple philosophy that continues to help suffering alcoholics achieve sobriety, as Bill W. first envisioned in 1935 while he was drying out in a New York hospital bed. Years later, after observing the success of AA's spiritual approach, Carl Jung wrote to Bill. Jung felt that alcoholism was in fact a low-level craving for spirituality. Recovery, he believed, could only happen by walking a path which leads to higher understanding. AA, he acknowledged, provided that path. Bill W. and Dr. Bob had got it right. The two visionaries had chosen a spiritual path, helping more than 2 million alcoholics to stay sober, simply by sharing their own experiences with one another. The journey was not always easy and not always pleasant. A journey marked by trial and error and many stops and starts, preserved here in the GSO archive. A spiritual journey which remains ongoing all over the world.
So it has been with AA. By faith and by work, we have been able to build upon the lessons of an incredible experience.
And one more thing, none of us would be here today if somebody hadn't taken time to explain things to us, to give us a little pat on the back, to take us to a meeting or two, to have done numerous little kind and thoughtful acts in our behalf. So let us